fine.
Can you talk about why you think your parents located themselves on Alki?
Well, my dad worked his way through law school at the University of Washington as first a deckhand, then an able seaman, then a mate, and finally, by the time he graduated, he'd spent 4 years on boats like the Iroquois, which was a 125-foot freighter running on the Sound. He became a master of Lake Bay and Sound boating, and he loved the water. And from our front porch, and we had an open front porch on our house down there at 1546, and matter of fact, when my mother's children came home from her first marriage, 3 of them, my older half sisters and a brother, we all slept in 2 double beds on the front porch and just was surrounded by canvas awnings you could let up and down. So it was great living in a place where you just always had something going on. The view out of our front door was never the same. The boats all move. 5 minutes changes the scenery for you, and we got used to that. But we've lived in so many places since where there was no view.
But you think, I'm taking from what you say, that your father really wanted to be close to the water.
Oh yeah, he loved the water. And he was a scrounger. He never did have a very successful law practice. We have always had enough to eat, but that was about it. But he was a generous guy who helped a lot of people, even gave away his mother's cemetery lots in Seattle to people who had no means to be properly buried and stuff. But he was generous, but he was extremely tight with us. The greatest toy I ever got from him was a bicycle he paid $2 for, and it had died in the sand under somebody's porch. And he heard about it, and so it cost him a couple of dollars for a couple of tires and a can of oil, and I was off. And I never had a small bike. I started with a 28-inch bike, and 26 inches were for girls. I had to wheel my bike down to the Beach Grocery at 1524 Alki Avenue. They had 2 benches out front under their front windows, and I'd walk my bike down there and then get up on the bench and then get on the bike and push off, and I was good for a while. That didn't last long. I learned how to get on and off it in a week, I suppose, but that's how I started riding a bike, using a bench to mount it. But I don't think I'm keeping on.
Oh, that's all right.
Course,
that's all right. That's what editing is for, and
yeah.
it's
Good.
fine.
Good.
Larry tells me that you have some stories about rum running from Blake Island, and I heard that Ceola Beach Drive was a real route for that, and that's sort of a hidden part of West Seattle.
I think, and it was never admitted, but I think my grandfather had a still going in the woods at Three Tree Point, which is South Seattle, way out west of Burien. And there was a lot of drinking going on in the 30s. We had prohibition in there interfering and changing life completely. And my dad, being a lawyer, spent a good part of his time keeping his friends and clients out of jail during Prohibition, which led to my being employed by the Seattle Rainiers because one of his good friends who had a lot of stills working during Prohibition became the manager of the ballpark when Emil Sick built it. And so I was the ball boy there for 3 years, starting in 1938 and 9. And so In 39, 40, and 41, they won all 3 pennants, and I handed the balls to the umpire for every game for all those 3 years. And I didn't have a uniform on. I had a dinner jacket that said Seattle Rainiers above the pocket, wore black slacks and black shoes, and I didn't even have a seat to sit on. I just opened the gate inward and planted my fanny on it and my feet out on the cinder running path around the field. But no uniforms or anything. But it was a good job. My first Social Security card says my employer was the Seattle Rainier Baseball Club.
You know, I have a very good friend who's the premier Seattle baseball collector, and he has a lot of Rainiers things. Do you still have your jacket?
I know who he is. No,
Dave Eskenazi.
No, that belonged to the ball club.
You had to give that back.
Oh yeah, you hung it up in the room and try not to get it dirty so we don't have to launder it. That was but the ball boy's job was to serve the umpires. And I cleaned their shoes and shined them before every game and got all the mud splatters off of their pants and sent their uniforms out for cleaning if needed. And then I had to take the gloss off of 24 balls every night before the game. That took a lot of dirt and a lot of spit. But it wasn't a very glamorous job, but it was a regular paycheck which kept the old 29 Chev running.
Back to Prohibition and the rum. You were saying that led to your Rainiers job, but were there rum runners from Blake Island over to Three Tree Point or over to Ciolo Beach or where?
I did not witness that. But I was told it was happening, and then because my dad was defending these people and keeping them out of jail, why we heard quite a bit about what was going on at home and just family talk. And but my grandmother and grandfather, my grandmother and grandfather were writers, and they even had one of the early day Washington newspapers called The Call out of Port Angeles. And when they thought Port Townsend was going to be the capital of Washington, they settled up there where they came from Iowa in 1888. And so the stories were still running rampant when I was young enough to pay any attention to, or was old enough to pay any attention to them. And there was a lot of things that weren't said in family talk about what was going on due to Prohibition and who was in it and who was not in it. And but there was heavy traffic in boating. A lot of boats were strictly shams for illegal running of rum and whatnot. The Puget Sound was all the way to Vancouver, Canada. The traffic was heavy boating traffic with illegal transportation of liquor. But I didn't witness it personally. I could only hearsay.
But you knew that it was going on.
Oh yeah. It was interesting. And then one of my dad's clients that gave me the job at the ballpark later on, years after, he bought a 65-foot freight boat that belonged to the DuPont Powder Company to transport dynamite to Alaska. And they had the Capon and the DuPont boats, twin boats. They were 65-footers with and they were 65 net tons. And so they were pretty substantial. And this Roy Massey, who became the manager of Sick's Stadium, he bought one of those, and he didn't have enough money to support it, and so my dad became a half owner by pitching in. And then my dad was handy because he had a skipper's license for Lake Bend Sound, and so he could be the skipper. And they rented that boat out on the weekends when I was in high school, and I would serve as a deckhand, and we would take the West Seattle Athletic Club and the Uptown Athletic Club from Seattle's football semi-pro teams, and we would take them all over the Sound. We'd leave Lake Union and go out through the locks in the early morning, take the teams there, and then the teams ate and drank their way home. And we had a huge galley below decks, and they were interesting weekends. I got to sit on the bench during the games. I waterboyed a lot, and it was interesting. But I had no idea and didn't realize what an impact the Prohibition had upon our economy and our society and our lifestyle, right? And my mother abhorred drinking, and because her first husband had gotten drunk and left her in Juneau, Alaska with 3 little babies, and he said he was going down to get some cigarettes, and he got on the boat and came back to Seattle and left her up there. She had to work. She was the Juneau's telephone operator at a PBX board, pulling all the cords in and out for 2 years before she saved enough money to buy boat tickets for she and her 3 kids to come back, and nobody else in the family had any money to send her. And so she was up there 2 years after he decided to go elsewhere. But anyway,
I've got to ask you. This is off topic for West Seattle, but Seattle Rainiers. You knew all of those players then.
Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, I transported a lot of them back and forth to the ballpark at night. Not a lot of them. I could only take 1 or 2 at a time, but Mike Budnick and
Now you said it was 39, 40, and 41 were the years that you were there? Or was it?
I was there 39, 40, and 41, and they won all 3 pennants.
And you were not there in 38?
No, that was the year the
first
6
year
opened, and an Italian kid, not a kid, he was about, he was 22 or 3 years old, named Joe, and he had an Italian last name I can't remember, but he was the ball boy the first year, and then he got something else to do for the 1939 season, and that's when Roy Massey called my dad, and he just inquired, do you think Dwight would like the job? Oh boy, I went for it. And at practice at West Seattle High School, I had all Pacific Coast League balls and broken but repaired professional bats. And West Seattle was never very well off. You know, we supplemented money to the athletic teams in high school through a stamp plan. We sold stamps to the kids. They stuck them in their books, and then that got them into the games free. But that money went to buying extra gear for the athletic teams and whatnot. And Roosevelt and Lincoln were the 2 in town who always had the best uniforms and stuff because they could afford it. Kids from Ballard, West Seattle, and Cleveland, we looked like a bunch of ragtags, and we'd wear the uniforms 4 or 5 years. And Lincoln and Roosevelt got new uniforms every year, and that was the difference in how it worked. And so, yeah, we were from across the tracks in West Seattle.
I'm going to have to get.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to have to get Dave to